All right, so in this video, I'm going to talk about a few additional coverage details for automobile insurance policies. The first one that I'm going to talk about is gap insurance. So if you buy a vehicle and you borrow money to buy it, typically vehicles depreciate very rapidly in the first couple of years of their life. So what can happen at that point is the vehicle can drop in value a whole lot more or a whole lot faster than you're paying off the loan. If you then get into an accident that totals the vehicle and you have the collision and comprehensive coverage because you had a loan, the insurance company pays out based upon what the value of the vehicle is at the time of the loss of the vehicle, which at that point can be much less than the value of the loan. And that creates sort of a gap. So gap insurance, if you have a loan or lease, helps to cover the additional amount of that you would need to receive in order to essentially pay off the loan in the event that you were in an accident and totaled your vehicle and things like that. Also, it's kind of worth noting that in most states, auto insurance is coverage is required as a matter of public policy, and the reason for that is basically not so much about you and your vehicle, in the sense that generally speaking, the coverages that are required are coverages that protect the other driver in their vehicle. And basically, the reason for that is if you want to take on the risk of totaling your super expensive exotic sports car and therefore incurring a massive financial loss, that's kind of up to you. But if you cause significant damage to somebody else, we need to make sure that you can actually make them whole and pay for the damages that you caused to somebody else. So generally, and for the most part, this is not necessarily applicable in every state, but typically, what's going to be required is for sure liability coverage to some extent or another that's protecting the other drivers and their property. It can vary from state to state. They may require some other kinds of coverages. There are some states that are no fault states, and that's going to then have more some personal injury protection components and so forth in there as well. Now, that's worth noting that for the personal injury protection in no fault states, that will have details associated with it and it'll be specified. But it's important to kind of note that no state actually has a completely pure no fault law. Generally, there are sort of varying shades of fault and what's covered and things like that. So even in the no fault states, there can be sort of different gradients of what's involved and kind of just how much no fault there really is. Um, it's also important to note in your coverage that it specifies what automobiles are covered. So you actually have to specify make and model and VIN number and all that kind of stuff. And so you have to specify all the different automobiles, motorcycles, what have you. And also you're going to have to specify who the insured individuals are. So the different insured individuals will matter. And you can have various exclusions. So some policies are named policies that will basically cover only the specific named individuals. You could have some policies that have excluded drivers. So if you had perhaps a teenage driver in the family who's had an accident or two, that starts getting very expensive very fast. So what you might wind up doing is basically buying an insurance policy that excludes that person from driving certain vehicles. Now, the downside of that is then that person can't drive those vehicles because they're not insured to drive it. But it could become necessary from a financial standpoint to exclude certain drivers and say, well, no, they are specifically excluded. Now, what insurance policies are not going to cover is intentional acts. So if you just get in your car one day and decide to randomly turn it into a battering ram to hit some other car, that's not going to be covered. If you're involved in racing, not covered. Vehicles with fewer than four wheels, not covered. Now, you might think that's kind of interesting. There are some vehicles that have fewer than four wheels. I mean, you can also buy motorcycle policies for vehicles with for motorcycles. And if you had a three-wheeled vehicle that was designed to have three wheels, then you might be able to buy a separate policy associated with that. But a typical policy is not gonna cover that kind of scenario in a normal situation. Of course, if you have a car that's designed for four wheels and it's only got three wheels, you got bigger problems. But I digress. Also, it's worth noting that coverages in other states in Canada and Mexico, it's kind of important to discuss a bit. States do recognize other states' insurance policies. So if you have insurance coverage in one state, then you have insurance coverage in other states. A U.S. insurance policy will also cover if you're driving in Canada, so that's good. Um, but a U.S. policy does not cover driving in Mexico. So if you are driving in Mexico, that could come at some significant risks because your insurance is not going to cover that. And if you cause an accident, they could require you to pay a pretty fair amount of money before they let you leave the country, for instance. So be very wary of driving internationally as a result of that. Make sure you've got appropriate insurance for that situation. All right, hopefully this video about some additional coverage option or coverage details has been helpful. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.